The US says China's military is spying on it from Cuba. That's been going on for years. But is China about to build a new spy base there? Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. Last week we reported that China had reached a deal to build a spy base in Cuba. That was based off a Wall Street Journal report that quoted anonymous U.S. officials saying that China has agreed to pay cash-strapped Cuba several $billions to allow it to build the eavesdropping station, and that the two countries had reached an agreement in principle. Yes, a communist country in a Cold War with the U.S. is using Cuba as a proxy while a Kennedy runs for the White House and Indiana Jones and Batman are in the movie theaters. I have no idea what year it is. According to the Journal, this is significant because an eavesdropping facility in Cuba, roughly 100 miles from Florida, would allow Chinese intelligence services to scoop up electronic communications throughout the southeastern U.S., where many military bases are located, and monitor U.S. ship traffic. Although since they're primarily eavesdropping on Florida, they'll mostly just overhear Ron DeSantis saying, "What can I call woke this week? Maybe Fruit Loops. A rainbow cereal for kids? Not on my watch." Now, if you live in America and you're freaking out about China suddenly spying at your doorstep, don't worry. China's been doing it for years already. You see, after the Journal and a few other media reported on this, everyone denied it. First, Cuba denied it. Then the Pentagon and White House denied it, or at least said the reports were not accurate. Then China denied it. But just 2 days after the news broke, the U.S. seemed to backpedal, saying the reports were, well, maybe not 100% accurate, but more or less got the story right about there being a planned Chinese spy base in Cuba. The White House said it had to declassify the info before it could talk openly about it. Now, the White House is saying that not only is China spying from Cuba, but that China's been there for some time.
When this administration took office in January 2021, we were briefed on a number of sensitive efforts by Beijing around the world to expand their overseas logistics, basing, collection infrastructure to allow them to project and sustain military power at a greater distance. They were considering a number of sites around the world for that expansion, including intelligence collection, facilities for intelligence collection in Cuba. In fact, based on the information we have, the PRC conducted an upgrade of its intelligence collection facilities in Cuba in 2019.
So yesterday it was a Chinese spy balloon. Today it's a Chinese spy base. Tomorrow it's going to be a Chinese spy boat traveling up the Mississippi River. So what is the Biden administration doing about this? I'll tell you after this quick commercial break. Welcome back. The Biden administration has admitted there's a Chinese spying operation in Cuba and that it poses a threat to the U.S. Media reports say China wants to beef up its presence there and that it has agreed to pay Cuba several $billions to allow it to build a new spy base there. They're on a beautiful tropical island and all they can think about is spy bases? No wonder China's so uptight. They don't know how to leave their work at home. Take a vacation, CCP. Preferably a permanent one. As of this recording, the Biden administration hasn't confirmed that yet, but plenty of media quoted anonymous sources saying that a deal was in the works. CNN reported the U.S. learned about the plan in the last several weeks, which if true would at least be one explanation why it's just now coming to light. So China's building a spy base everyone knows about. Good plan. Former U.S. Ambassador to China, Max Baucus, told CNN he was surprised the Biden administration initially denied the reporting because China has had a presence in Cuba for a long time. Now, considering Cuba and China are communist allies, China using it as a hub for spying is hardly a surprise. After all, Cuba allowed the Soviets to put nuclear missiles there during the Cold War to threaten their common enemy, the U.S. Man, I thought my neighbor was passive-aggressive for putting up a sign saying quiet hours are from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Glad she put that on my door instead of on a nuke. And it would be kind of surprising if China didn't use its connections to Cuba for spying because of how close it is to the U.S. Cuba is just 90 miles from Florida, which houses the headquarters of the U.S. Southern Command, the U.S. Central Command, and the U.S. Special Operations Command. The Southern Command covers everything in the Western Hemisphere south of the U.S. The Central Command focuses on the Middle East, and the U.S. Special Operations Command covers all U.S. Special Forces. James Stavridis, a former commander of the U.S. Southern Command, said their control and command center fused data from all around the world and provided a detailed picture of military, intelligence, and narcotic activity throughout the region. So having a military presence close to Florida would be very valuable, especially if China can pick up U.S. military signals. Not to mention the value of being on the Cuban island, which, in addition to Cuba, holds both the U.S. Guantanamo Bay maximum security prison and naval base. We've known since at least April that China has a plan to build spy facilities around the world. Again, it's not the most effective spy base when everyone knows about it. But we know that thanks to high-level documents leaked by former Massachusetts Air National Guardsman Jack Teixeira. The Washington Post says the leaked documents show the U.S. was concerned about a possible Chinese spy base being built in the United Arab Emirates. Under pressure from the U.S., the UAE said it had stopped construction, but last December, U.S. intelligence showed the buildup had resumed. The documents also showed that Beijing's efforts in the UAE are part of an ambitious campaign by China's People's Liberation Army to build a global military network that includes at least 5 overseas bases and 10 logistical support sites by 2030. The Biden administration says it's been working on countering these bases by putting pressure on would-be host countries. Man, this live-action spy versus spy remake is way less hilarious than I'd hoping it'd be.
I can't get into every step that we've taken, but the strategy begins with diplomacy. We've engaged governments that are considering hosting PRC bases at high levels. We've exchanged information with them. Our experts assess that our diplomatic efforts have slowed down this effort by the PRC.
As part of these diplomatic efforts, the White House says it has spoken to Cuba directly about hosting a Chinese spy base. Yep, that's their big plan. Hey, Cuba, you know how you're letting your buddy build a spy base? Could you, not? We'd owe you one. Cuba's foreign minister responded that the allegations were false. He called them a U.S. fabrication meant to justify Washington's decades-old economic embargo against the island. The embargo he's referring to is the trade and travel restrictions the U.S. put on Cuba in 1962, shortly after Cuba was taken over by communists. The sanctions were meant to topple the communist regime, but thanks to communist allies like Russia and Venezuela, Cuba's economy has remained afloat, although just barely. Their economy is basically that door Rose was clinging to at the end of Titanic. It could support her, but not her and Jack. James Cameron himself even tested that. They would have sunk. Debate settled. Anyway, the embargo on Cuba has made for a tense relationship with the U.S., to say the least. In 1982, President Reagan labeled Cuba a state sponsor of terrorism. But in 2015, President Obama dropped that label and restored diplomatic relations with Cuba. However, Trump cut off those ties again in 2017, after a U.S. diplomat started suffering from a strange disease that's been dubbed Havana syndrome. According to the Wall Street Journal, Havana syndrome is a set of unexplained medical symptoms, including headaches, dizziness, fatigue, nausea, anxiety, and cognitive difficulties, first experienced by U.S. State Department personnel stationed in Cuba in late 2016, although it has occurred all over the world. The jury's still out on what causes it. It could be an illness native to the island or a trick Cuba picked up from its old pal Russia. Trump also gave Cuba back the state sponsor of terrorism label. And while Biden has eased some sanctions, it hasn't restored diplomatic relations with Cuba, and the embargo remains in place. So how effective is the U.S. telling Cuba not to host a Chinese spy base going to be? I'm guessing about as effective as telling your cat not to play hockey with your coffee cup. It might not be long before Cuba knows all about Ron DeSantis' planned war on those woke Fruit Loops. And bringing you stories like this would not be possible without support from viewers like you. Leave a like and a comment because it really does help us with the YouTube algorithm. And if you can, join the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army by contributing to us on patreon.com/China Uncensored. All it takes is $1 an episode. You can also set a monthly limit. And as a thank you, I'll answer your questions at the end of the show. Today's question comes from Jim May. Chris, would the U.S. creating an umbrella of protection for Chinese students' freedom of speech by further decoupling be a stronger threat than military actions? An interesting question, Jim. Jim is responding to a recent episode about how the Chinese Communist Party harasses and censors Chinese students studying right here in America. So, what do we do about that? Well, in general, Jim, I think you're right that for most things, military action is not the best way to respond to Communist Party aggression. The problem of Chinese students in the U.S. is a real problem. Since they have to go back to China at some point, and they have family still in China, they live in a constant state of fear. The party will always have leverage over them. The U.S. can shut down Chinese students and scholar associations that do the most harm to Chinese students. But the main thing the Chinese Communist Party does is persecute Chinese people. American universities need to stop kowtowing to the CCP's demands because of all the money they get from Chinese international students. But the U.S. needs to realize these students are on the front line of the battle between the free world and communism, and needs to make a priority of educating them about the real nature of the Communist Party. Thanks for your question and your support, Jim. Thank you for watching. Once again, if you want me to answer your question on the show, head on over to patreon.com/China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.